In the desolate stillness of rural Oregon, there are things that should never be seen and sounds that should never be heard. The house sat at the dead end of a long gravel path, hemmed in by ancient apple trees with branches as gnarled as the fingers of the dead. The silence here was not peaceful. It was a heavy, suffocating silence, the kind that signals something is watching. It all began with a minor flaw, the kind of domestic nuisance easily ignored. The peephole on the front door was cracked. Through that fractured lens, the world outside was warped into a distorted smear of gray and shadow, a funhouse mirror of the dark. The first night. The clock's hand ticked toward midnight. The only sound in the living room was the rhythmic turning of book pages and the low hiss of the fading fireplace. It was faint, hardly more than a dry twig brushing against the siding, but the rhythm was too deliberate. Tap, tap. Approaching the door, an eye pressed against the broken peephole. All that appeared was a milky, swirling blur of midnight mist. No silhouette, no movement. The motion sensor porch light remained dark, casting no glow. When the door was finally pulled open, the porch was empty. Only the biting wind rushed in, carrying the scent of damp earth and rot. Yet the moment the deadbolt clicked back into place, the sensation of a cold stare pressing against the back of the neck became undeniable. A shiver traced the spine, even as the embers in the hearth glowed red. The second night, heavy snow brought, a white shroud that swallowed the sounds of the living. At 1 a.m., a sudden, unnatural draft of ice-cold air drifted through the hallway, triggering a primal instinct to awake. The front door, the one that had been double-locked, was standing ajar. Just a sliver, a tiny gap wide enough for the darkness outside to spill in like a black liquid. The heart thrashed against the ribs, a deafening drumbeat in the ears. This time, looking through the jagged peephole, something different emerged from the white void. A dark, solid shape stood at the very edge of the outdoor floodlight's reach. It was a tall, motionless figure, as still as a cursed wooden totem. Minutes stretched into an eternity of silent confrontation. The figure did not knock, it did not move, it simply waited. But when the outdoor floodlights were flicked on, the shadow vanished, leaving behind only a set of small, strangely circular footprints leading from the woods directly to the bedroom window. By the third night, exhaustion had begun to erode logic. A strange odor, the smell of moldering wood with something sickly sweet, like decaying meat, clung to the air of the master bedroom. In the oppressive dark, a soft shuffling sound erupted from the built-in wardrobe. The closet door, long since fallen off its hinges, began to creak open. A long, spindly hand with knuckles like polished stones reached out, gripping the wooden frame. From the black throat of the closet, a creature emerged. He was impossibly tall, forced to hunch his spine to keep his head from scraping the ceiling. His skin was the color of a drowned man, reflecting the weak moonlight. He moved toward the vanity mirror, standing silently, admiring his own pale, featureless reflection. Then he began to laugh, a sound that wasn't human, but a dry, rattling hiss like dead leaves skittering across a grave. Abruptly, his neck snapped 180 degrees to face the bed, while his body remained perfectly still. His eyes, huge, milky orbs without pupils, stared directly into the darkness where a heart was racing. In a blur of sheer terror, the silence was shattered. What followed were only fragments of memory. Bare feet sprinting over frozen snow, the burning of lungs in the sub-zero air, and the flickering neon light of a distant gas station. The police found the house empty, but the truth hidden within the walls was enough to ensure no one would ever live there again. Behind the back panel of the wardrobe lay a narrow, filth-ridden crawl space. There they found a dusty blanket, heaps of discarded food wrappers, and hundreds of photographs, Polaroids taken through the slats of the air vents. But the most chilling discovery was the broken peephole. The original glass had been removed long ago and replaced with a different lens. For all those nights, whenever someone had pressed their eye against the door to see who was knocking, they weren't looking at the mist. They weren't looking at a ghost. They were looking into his eye. He had been right there, separated only by a thin layer of glass, pressing his own milky pupil against the lens to look directly into theirs. He didn't knock to get in. He was already inside. The knocking was just a game, a way to lure his prey to the door so he could watch the fear bloom in their eyes from a distance of only a few millimeters. Today, in a new apartment, the peephole is covered with thick black tape. But every so often, in the dead of night, a soft tap-tap echoes from the other side, a reminder that some predators don't need a key to enter your life.
I work as an inventory auditor for a logistics firm, a job that usually ends well after midnight. Because of my tight budget, I rented a unit on the 14th floor of a newly built high-rise complex that had been partially halted mid-construction. Out of the 40 units on my floor, only 3 were occupied, but after a horrific elevator malfunction last month, the other 2 households packed up and left. Now, every night when I return, I am the sole owner of a long, desolate hallway illuminated only by flickering motion sensor lights. Living in absolute solitude makes your hearing sharpen to a terrifying degree. I can hear the wind whistling through a window gap in a vacant unit 5 doors down, or the rhythmic drip of a broken pipe somewhere on the floor above. It all began on a rainy night 2 weeks ago. While I was cooking some noodles in the kitchen, there was a knock. It wasn't a frantic pounding, but 3 soft, polite taps. I checked the clock, 1:15 a.m. I approached the peephole. Outside stood a young woman dressed in the uniform of a well-known pizza delivery chain. She stood with her head slightly bowed, holding a steaming hot box. I hadn't ordered any food, but the thought of a simple mistake made me lower my guard. I cracked the door open. "I didn't order a pizza," I said. The woman looked up. Her face was incredibly pale, her eyes sunken with heavy dark circles as if from severe sleep deprivation. She didn't look directly at me. Instead, she stared at the empty space just behind my shoulder. "Unit 1408 ordered this. It's a prepaid order. They said to leave it if no one answers," she said in a flat, soulless monotone. "But this is 1404. Unit 1408 is at the very end of the hall. It's vacant," I explained, pointing toward the deep shadows of the corridor. She didn't respond. She simply placed the box on the shoe rack next to my door and turned away. I stood there, watching her figure disappear into the emergency exit stairwell instead of taking the elevator. A strange feeling rose in my gut, but the savory aroma of the pizza distracted me. I brought the box inside. When I opened it, there was no pizza. It contained only a small scrap of paper with a jagged, handwritten note. "Thank you for opening the door." My entire body froze. I lunged to lock the door, my heart hammering against my ribs. I was the only person on this floor. Who had sent this? And why did the delivery girl know I would open the door? I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the sofa, eyes glued to the crack beneath the door. Around 3 a.m., I heard the faint ding of the elevator. Then, footsteps. Not one person, but several. These weren't stealthy footsteps. They walked slowly and heavily across the hallway carpet. They stopped right outside my door. I held my breath and crawled toward the peephole. Through the narrow lens, I saw 3 men. They weren't wearing black or tactical gear. They wore formal suits, but their faces, they were all wearing cheap plastic masks of smiling children. One man stepped close to the door. He didn't knock. He reached up and began to scratch the wooden surface with his fingernails. That gruesome scuttling sound lasted for 10 agonizing minutes. The other 2 stood behind him, holding old cameras, repeatedly firing the flashes at the gap under my door. The cold white light strobed into my dark room, over and over. Trembling, I tried to call the police, but the signal on my floor was suddenly and inexplicably jammed. There was only static and broken whispers on the other end. Suddenly, the scratching stopped. A deep, muffled voice spoke right against the doorframe. "Next time, don't open the door for strangers, unless you want us to come inside and share the pizza." Laughter erupted, followed by the sound of retreating footsteps. When I finally found the courage to look through the peephole again, the hallway was empty. The motion lights had flickered out. The next morning, I packed my bags to leave immediately. As I stepped into the hallway, I noticed a detail I had missed the night before in my terror. Unit 1408, the unit the delivery girl had mentioned, was standing ajar. I couldn't suppress my curiosity and peeked inside. The room was stripped of furniture, but on the floor in the center of the living room were dozens of pizza boxes, identical to the one I had received. All were empty. And on the wall opposite the entrance, someone had used red spray paint to draw a large circle around 1404, my unit number. I fled and never went back for my security deposit. To this day, even living in a crowded neighborhood, whenever I hear a soft knock in the dead of night, my blood runs cold. I know that out there are those who hunt the lonely, and they have enough patience to wait until you accidentally open the only door protecting you.
I used to work as an operations technician at an old power and data transmission substation, isolated in the middle of a sprawling cornfield in rural Oregon. It was a bleak, concrete monolith, surrounded by rusted chain-link fences and dense pine forests. My job was to pull the night shift alone, from 10 p.m. to 5 a.m., monitoring circuit boards and ensuring the servers didn't overheat. In a place like that, silence is the loudest sound you'll ever hear. When the cooling fans occasionally cycled down, the entire building fell into a state of stillness so profound I could hear my own heartbeat. To drown it out, I usually kept my earbuds in, losing myself in late-night radio broadcasts. That particular night was damp and misty. The air felt heavy with the scent of wet earth and rot. Around 1 a.m., while I was checking the electrical cabinets in the west wing, a section where the lights always flickered due to faulty ballasts, I heard a faint thud. I pulled my earbuds out. Silence. I told myself it was just metal expanding or contracting with the temperature. But then, from the main lobby leading to the operations office, a footstep echoed. Slow, heavy. Thud, thud, thud. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. "David, did you forget something?" I called out my manager's name, hoping for a familiar reply.
but the only response was a killing silence. The footsteps stopped the very second I spoke. I grabbed my heavy industrial flashlight and stumbled toward the lobby. The beam sliced through the pitch-black server rows, casting long, distorted shadows against the walls. As I neared the office, I noticed the break room door was slightly ajar. I knew for a fact I had locked it earlier. I summoned every ounce of courage and pushed it open. Empty. Anxiety gnawed at my stomach. I hurried back to the central control desk and pulled up the surveillance feed. The system was ancient. The footage was grainy, flickering in black and white. I rewound the tape by 5 minutes. My heart nearly stopped at what I saw on the screen. A tall figure, dressed in tattered, filthy coveralls, was walking backwards down the hallway behind me while I was checking the electrical cabinets. He had been standing less than 2 meters from my back, staring at the scruff of my neck for 2 full minutes, only to vanish into the darkness the moment I turned my head. I lunged to my feet, my chair clattering to the floor. Right then, at the small glass window separating the control room from the warehouse floor, a foot slammed against the pane. It was a middle-aged man, but his face was unnaturally white. His eyes were wide, so wide I couldn't see his pupils, only bloodshot sclera staring through the glass. He didn't knock. He began to slam his forehead into the glass with animalistic fury. Thud, thud, thud. Every strike was violent and desperate. I reached for the desk phone to call for help, but the cord had been severed. He began to laugh, a dry, raspy sound like a throat being torn open. He pulled something from his pocket, a long iron nail. He began to scrape it across the glass, creating a high-pitched screech that felt like it was piercing my eardrums. "Open the door," he whispered, his voice seeping through the doorframe. Then he stepped back and suddenly charged with his full body weight against the metal door. I scrambled to throw the secondary bolt, feeling the bone-shaking force of the impact from the other side. The door groaned on its hinges. I bolted into the server room, squeezing into the narrow gap between the heavy server racks in the wall, hoping the heat and the hum of the machinery would mask my presence. I heard the outer door give way with a sickening metallic snap. His footsteps dragged across the concrete floor, slow and methodical, like a hunter savoring the fear of his prey. He paced past each row. "You're hiding so well, but I can smell your terror." He stopped directly in front of the rack where I was crouched. I clamped my hand over my mouth to stifle my sobs. Through a tiny gap, I saw his old mud-caked boots. He stood there in total silence for 10 minutes, the longest 10 minutes of my life. Suddenly, the distant wail of a police siren cut through the night. Perhaps a neighbor from a nearby farm had heard the commotion. The heavy footsteps quickly retreated toward the back exit. When the police arrived, the building was empty. They found signs of forced entry at a basement fire door where the alarm system had been bypassed long ago. On the office window where he had pressed his face, they found dried blood from his forehead and a message scratched into the dust with his fingernail. "See you tomorrow night." I moved out of the suburbs the very next day. Even now, working in a brightly lit office in the heart of the city, I never wear earbuds when staying late, because I know that some things don't need sound to find you, and sometimes the fact that you can't hear them is the most terrifying thing of all.